Hey there, in this video I'm going to lay out the full bull case for Palantir, or ticker symbol PLTR. So if you're interested in Palantir and thinking about investing in the company, or if you're already invested in the company and you're thinking about either adding to or decreasing the size of your position, then this video is going to lay out every single major argument for why buying Palantir today is a good idea. Now there's a ton of videos already out there pumping up the stock and saying that the company is going to hit a $1 trillion valuation, but that's not what I'm up to here. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different here and try to present a fully impartial analysis by laying out both sides of the argument, both bull, bear, pro, con. And that means I'm going to be posting a second video outlining the full bear thesis for Palantir, including every major argument why buying the stock today is actually a bad idea. So stay tuned for that. Quick disclaimer before I get started. First of all, this video is not intended to be financial advice, and I'm not trying to tell you to either buy or sell the stock. All I'm doing is doing analysis and comparison of all the publicly available information that I could find on this company. I'm trying to put all that information together here in a clear and concise way. But if you're actually thinking about making an investment decision about this company, then definitely do your own due diligence. Secondly, I do own some shares of Palantir, and although I'm trying to be fully impartial, please always be skeptical and take everything I say with a grain of salt. This video is going to be a little bit on the longer side because I'm doing a super deep dive here. I've spent hours researching the stock and compiling all of the major bull arguments that I could find from a wide variety of sources, including news outlets, actual financial analysts, reports, as well as YouTube videos, Reddit, and basically any information that I can get my hands on that sheds some light on the stock. I can guarantee you that even if you're a huge fan of Palantir already, you probably won't have seen all of these arguments, or at least you won't have seen them all together in one place. So with that out of the way, let's get started. First of all, let me just quickly run through what Palantir actually does and what its value proposition is. Now, if you've never heard of the company, essentially it's a data analytics and AI software that turns huge quagmires of data into actual accessible, useful information that provides recommendations to decision makers. The Palantir software can aggregate and integrate data from a variety of sources to provide the client with the information that they need to make the best decisions. They can also simulate different scenarios using historical data and then use predictive analytics software to establish what might happen next. The company's been around for about 2 decades, but for the vast majority of its history, it was primarily a defense contractor, working with the Department of Defense and the CIA and other top secret agencies in the US. Palantir went public a year ago though, and has been starting to scale up the commercial side of their business. Now, they have 2 main products, which are Gotham and Foundry. Gotham is the government side of the business that handles all of the top secret contracts and works with the Defense Department and all of those other agencies. Foundry, on the other hand, is the software that's used for commercial clients, and that's applying all of the lessons and the software that's been developed over decades of working in the top secret defense sector to actually benefit private sector companies. Palantir also has a couple of other products, including Metropolis, which services the financial sector. It has Foundry for Startups, which is basically a pared down version of Foundry to help small business startups get going and run on big data. And then it also has something called Apollo. Palantir Apollo is basically an enabler that's going to let them deploy their other platforms onto different networks and cloud systems more quickly and more efficiently. So before getting into all of the bull case arguments, let's briefly discuss the use cases for this software, for this AI. Palantir has proven its use case for many, many years. Now, as I mentioned, they started out in the national security sector, and one of the biggest accomplishments that they have is that they helped to find bin Laden. Now, you won't see Palantir advertising that or announcing it, but it's widely speculated that they were the software that actually analyzed all of the various points of data and helped the US government actually locate bin Laden. A couple of other high-profile examples is that they worked to identify roadside bombs by analyzing different data and patterns that emerge from the data. Palantir's helped locate Mexican drug cartels and bring them to justice, and their software is actively used to ensure that over 1 million US military members are constantly ready for military service. Aside from the government and security world, Palantir has a number of top-tier clients. One of the biggest ones and the most public partnerships they have is with Airbus. Basically, Palantir has helped Airbus connect all of their different databases and ensure that they're being efficient along every step of the supply chain, which has vastly improved profit margin and the speed at which Airbus is able to produce airplanes. There's a ton of other examples, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other clients that Palantir has in a couple of minutes. So what are all of the bull arguments, or why would somebody want to invest in Palantir today? I'm going to start by talking about the qualitative side of the equation, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about the numbers and the quantitative stuff. First of all, let's talk about the sector or the industry that Palantir is in. So data analytics and AI is obviously a growth industry. Data is currently being produced worldwide at an exponential clip. And consider this statistic. In the past 2 years alone, 90% of the world's data from the entire history of humankind was created. Data and information management is going to be the industry of the future, and a lot of analysts suggest that we're really at the beginning of that gold rush. And with that growth in the amount of data, there's going to be the requirement for somebody to be able to look at it and analyze it and make sense of it. And that's where Palantir comes in. When it comes to Palantir's actual product, their software, or their AI, everyone that uses it says that it's amazing and that it's world-class. So let's talk about intellectual property and research and development. When it comes to research and development, Palantir invests heavily. In the past 12 months, they've put over 617 million in, and that amount is steadily going up over time. And that's the kind of large-scale investment in research and development that is really going to compound the company's advantage and cement their position of superiority in the AI and data analytics space. As of December 2019, Palantir had 475 US patents and over 500 patents outside of the US, as well as 800 other patents that were still pending. And all of these are for data management and database management systems. So with all of that money going into research and development and then protecting their IP with all of those patents, well over 1,000 patents, the company is well positioned for the future. Next, let's talk about the leadership of the company, because that's one of the most important factors in determining whether or not in a growth industry a company is going to be successful. And when we look at Palantir, they have excellent leadership across the board. The co-founder and chairman of the company is, of course, Peter Thiel, who was also the co-founder of PayPal and was an early investor in Facebook, Tesla, SpaceX, and all kinds of other industry-changing companies. The CEO of Palantir is Alex Karp, who's really a visionary, a doctorate in philosophy, not a business person, and that has actually potentially helped him and helped the company in the long run because they don't do things the way they've normally been done. Thiel, Karp, and the other members of the board of directors and the executive team really do have a long-term vision for the company. They patiently waited for over 17 years before actually going public, and over that time, they developed their moats, as I'll talk about in a few minutes. By the time they launched commercial operations, they were so entrenched in the government sector and had so many huge clients in the government sector that they had that stable, steady revenue and had 17 plus years of research and development to perfect their product and their service offering. This leadership team doesn't really give a about the short term or about hype. They have their sights set very far in the future, and in the next couple of decades are imagining the company as a behemoth of global industry. And just to give you a rough sense of the level of ambition of the company, take a look at this quote from the CEO, Alex Karp, who says they want Palantir to be the most important software company in the world. I think that's a pretty clear indication of where this company and its management team is aiming. Now, they're not going to be concerned about profits in the short term or paying out dividends. They're focused exclusively on growth and the future. So if you're looking at this company and you're thinking about day trading or swing trading or turning a quick 10x profit, then it's probably not going to be for you. I guess the only question here is whether or not you think that the cast of leadership here with Thiel, Karp, and the others is going to be able to actually deliver on those lofty goals. Now, moving from the leadership, let's talk about some of the other people in the company, mainly the talent, the people that they hire, the AI engineers, the salespeople, and all of the others. Now, basically what you'll see across the board is that Palantir has been scooping up some of the most talented people for decades. It's notoriously difficult to get a job for Palantir, even an internship, and those that do go there tend to stay for a while. partially because of the stock-based compensation, which I'll talk about shortly, but also because they recognize once they start working for the company that really it is the company of the future. When your product is excellent, when your leadership team is first class and is focused firmly on the future, and when the people that work for the company are some of the most talented folks in the world, what you have there is a recipe for success. Now let's talk about stock-based compensation, because there's two sides to this point, one of which is actually on the bear side of the argument, but I'm going to discuss that side of the equation in the next video. On the bull side, the fact that Palantir offers a really competitive stock-based compensation to its employees and its management means that it's going to be able to retain some of the best people, it's going to keep those people loyal, and it really reflects the fact that those people believe in the company that they work for. Now, of course, some people have suggested that the stock-based compensation for the company, especially for the executives and mainly for the CEO Carp, is way too high. That said, stock-based compensation will level out over the coming years. It's really the fact that the company IPO'd last year that you're seeing this huge spike. And the people arguing the bull case for this company will say that the stock-based compensation was necessary in order to hire the most talented people, and then that will pay dividends in the long term. Now let's talk about competition. And on the bull side of this argument, people will say that Palantir doesn't have any direct competition. They've built a massive moat over the past couple of decades, refining and perfecting their product and their AI. And now they are launching publicly, they're going out and they're acquiring all these clients, and nobody else has anything they can do to stop them. There's definitely other data analytics and AI companies that could be competitors, and I'm going to talk about those mainly in the bear case video, but what Palantir sees as their main competitor is actually that their clients could develop in-house solutions, and in some cases that might happen, but for most of the potential customers of Palantir, developing an in-house solution is going to be far more costly and far more complicated than they are able to deliver on. Also, it would take a very long time, and Palantir has their products, their services already packaged up and ready to go. And the longer it would take to develop their own solution, Palantir is just going to keep getting better, faster, and smarter. And a brilliant thing that Palantir is doing to address any potential competition concerns in the future is that it's going out and actually creating partnerships and cooperations with a bunch of companies that could potentially be competitors. So Palantir is just integrating itself into everything, like an octopus with 100 arms. For example, Palantir is now partnering with IBM and with Amazon Web Services. It's also just recently announced a massive partnership with Data Robot. Palantir also just announced a partnership with Wejo to create an integrated data ecosystem for the automotive industry using vehicle data that Wejo collects, and then Palantir is going to integrate, aggregate, and analyze all that data. So by combining forces with these other companies that are working on quantum computing and web services and data analytics, Palantir is just cementing its position and reinforcing its moat. I'm just going to leave it there because Palantir has announced way too many deals and partnerships to go through all of them, but it is a massive pro for the company. Another bull argument for Palantir is the government connections. Over several decades, they've survived different cycles of different governments, both Democrat and Republican, and regardless of who's in power, Palantir is getting massive contracts and is doing big business. And if you go back and you look at the history of the company, you'll see that it took them a lot of work and a lot of effort to get their foot in the door. At the beginning, when Palantir was a total unknown, none of these massive government agencies wanted to touch the company, but through persistence, lobbying, and creativity, they actually managed to land a couple of deals, and then that has now snowballed into this position where they basically have a monopoly on government contracts when it comes to data analytics, especially in the defense and security sector. And the fact that Palantir is so connected and integrated into all of these different government agencies is great because governments are notoriously bad at changing things. So once you're in, you're usually in for a very long time, especially if you've proven your value and the use case of your product or software. Also, it means that Palantir is more recession proof than a lot of other companies because the government always spends money, especially in a recession when the economy is bad and they need to stimulate. Another bull argument for Palantir is that they are essentially pandemic proof. While a lot of companies really suffered over the past year and a half, 2 years, Palantir actually thrived. With all of their government contracts, Palantir was actually a part of the solution. And within the first 3 weeks of the lockdown, they actually had 83 engagements with new clients or potential customers. So really, it was a tailwind for the business, according to the chief operating officer. Now, Now let's talk about the data access moat. And this is a really interesting point because when you're dealing with artificial intelligence and you're training your algorithms and your software to become better at analyzing data and recognizing patterns, the more data you have, the better the AI gets. And this is where Palantir has developed a massive moat because of decades of access to top secret data that no one else has that improves the quality of the AI and the software. This gives them a huge advantage over other commercial companies. And every time they go out and they sign a new massive contract with BP or with JP Morgan or with Airbus, they get access to all of that data and they train their AI and their software on it. And it just has a snowballing compounding effect. It's a self-reinforcing feedback loop, and it's going to create a situation where it's going to be very, very difficult for a potential competitor to catch up. Just as an example, let's talk about the Skywise partnership that Palantir has with Airbus and 100 airlines worldwide. Basically, Palantir's software is connecting over 100 airlines, over 9,000 aircraft, and all of the suppliers to the airlines, and integrating all of the data from flight and engineering and operations and logistics to create vast improvements in economies of scale and efficiencies. So you can imagine just how much data is being produced and analyzed, improving the software in that self-reinforcing feedback loop. And can you imagine any other company being able to actually surpass that moat? Probably not. Another moat that we can talk about here is the security clearance moat. Now, Palantir is the only company that has level 6 classification for secret national security material to do data analysis. No other company has that level of security clearance, and it would be very difficult for them to achieve it, meaning that Palantir has basically become a permanent fixture of the national security industry in the US. Another bull argument in favor of Palantir is just to look at the clientele that they have. All of the US government, foreign government, and massive corporations that they have in their client book. When it comes to Palantir's customers, there's actually some unknowns because the company is quite secretive about who it works with unless the partner actually wants it to be announced publicly, like Airbus, for example. That said, in terms of clients that we know for sure Palantir has, they've got basically every major government agency or institution in the US that you can think of. They've got the CIA, the FBI, the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, the Center for Disease Control, the Federal Aviation Authority, and so on and so forth. Then you've got foreign governments like the UK for healthcare and military, you've got Japan for healthcare, you've got Canada for the Department of Defense, and many other countries as well. And then the list of private sector clients is massive. It's too long to go through in full, but some of the main ones that you'll definitely have heard of include AT&T in the telecom industry, BP in the oil sector, 3M in healthcare and consumer goods, Rio Tinto in the mining sector, Credit Suisse in the financial sector, Airbus producing airplanes, United Airlines actually flying them, many other airlines as well. Then you've got Fiat, Chrysler, Ferrari in the auto sector, and many, many more companies across 40 sectors and growing. On top of that, there's a whole host of speculation about other potential clients that just haven't been announced yet or that want to remain under wraps. But through some digging, and if you look closely online, you can see some leaks or some other investigative work that shows some of the potential clients include Pfizer, Tesla, Pepsi, and a lot of other massive, big household name companies. Now let's talk about Palantir's total addressable market, or TAM for short. Basically, the bigger the TAM, the bigger the company can potentially grow, because that's going to show you how much business they could potentially get. Now, a lot of companies are really limited in their total addressable market by the industry or the sector that they're in. But with Palantir, really all bets are off, because there's a use case for Palantir's software in basically every industry or sector that you can imagine. And that's what's really throwing some analysts for a loop, because it's difficult to determine what Palantir's TAM is, and that makes it difficult to try and pin down a valuation for the company. Now, currently Palantir's software is being used in at least 40 industries, but you could easily see that increasing. And as they ramp up their client acquisition and move into new industries and sectors, that number is for sure going to go up. Current estimates from the company itself and then from analysts suggest that the TAM could be anywhere from $100 billion to $250 billion, but realistically, it could be much, much larger, because we're just starting to see the company go public and then develop those commercial relationships. So it's going to be interesting to see over time just how widespread this software can become. Like I said, Alex Karp, the CEO, wants Palantir to be the most important software company in the world. And to match that level of ambition, the company suggests that every large institution in the world has a problem that Palantir could help solve. It's really tough to pin down the total addressable market, and I'm not going to try and make an estimate here because I'm not in the business of doing that, but one of the major bull arguments for people that are really pro Palantir is that the total addressable market is potentially infinite, only limited by your level of creativity and the number of use cases that you can imagine for the software. An interesting thing here is that there's actually some limitations on customers that Palantir signs up or is willing to sign up. For instance, they have actively said that they will not engage in any business with the government of China or any Chinese entities. A part of Palantir's core mission is to support Western liberal democracies, and so by setting some of these limitations on potential clients, they are in one way reducing the size of their total addressable market, but on the other hand, they're really cementing their position in all of the strategic allies of the US. And some people might see that as a bad thing, but I actually see it as a benefit. Given the geopolitics of the US-China relationship and a lot of the kind of shady stuff that goes on with Chinese companies, it could potentially be to Palantir's benefit to avoid that altogether. And they would also probably have to give up a lot of their US government contracts if they open things up to the Chinese government or to Chinese companies, which would be a huge hit to Palantir's bottom line and to their business model as a whole. So realistically, if you have to choose between the two, I think they made the right choice. Next up is client acquisition. I've already hinted at this, but basically the company did not have any salespeople and made no effort to go out and acquire commercial clients for decades. It's only recently in the last couple of years, and really since they went public, they started ramping it up. They've hired new sales teams, and now they're actively seeking out commercial business, and the results are showing. In Q2 of this year alone, Palantir closed over 62 new deals worth at least $1 million, and a lot of them much more than that. And the interesting thing is that when Palantir moves into a new industry and signs up a big ticket client, then all of that company's competitors are going to take notice. On top of that, every time Palantir branches out into a new industry, they're gaining new sector-specific knowledge that they can then use to improve the quality of their service offering for other clients. And that's going to create another compounding, reinforcing effect. And that means that all that company's competitors are now going to have to seriously think about also using Palantir's software. Otherwise, there's going to be a big gap that ends up opening up, and the first mover is going to have a massive advantage. So this could really help Palantir's client acquisition and adoption rates as they branch out into new sectors. Another pro for Palantir in the client acquisition category is that they just started marketing this year. This is the first time they've had a budget for marketing at all. And you'll see Palantir's ads popping up in different places, including on YouTube if you watch a lot of videos, because they've produced some really high quality video advertisements that they're now putting out there. Considering that the company has made it this far for over 17 plus years without running a single ad, the fact that they're only just starting now means that big things could be potentially in the future. When it comes to the sales force, they're building that up as well. They're really focusing now on hiring new salespeople in different countries around the world to go out and acquire these new customers, these new clients. And if you go to Palantir's website and check out the career section, actually, you can see all of the different cities that they're hiring salespeople in. So this really is a global effort and a global push. And as they go out and hire all these new people, they're going to bring in new business, and it's going to continue to grow at a rapid clip. A final point to make in the client acquisition section is that a lot of bears will suggest it takes way too long to sign customers up through Palantir. Sometimes it could take days or weeks, and that process really hampers growth and is going to prevent Palantir from reaching those lofty valuation targets that some people are setting. But Palantir is developing or has developed a solution for that as well, and that's Palantir Apollo, which is going to let them, according to the company, actually sign up and bring new customers online in a matter of hours, as opposed to days or weeks. If true, that's going to help the company scale immensely, and that's going to have a great positive impact. An especially interesting opportunity for Palantir is to work with companies that have legacy data sets and help them make sense of it, integrate it into some modern software systems, and then actually use that data. Companies that grew up in the tech sector like Google and Microsoft have developed their own in-house methods for actually aggregating and using all the data that they collect. But in a lot of other industries that aren't tech related, that has not been the case. And so Palantir really has an opportunity to go into those companies that have those legacy data sets and help them significantly. Since it's going to be much easier for the company to integrate with older legacy systems, that's going to make it easier and cheaper for clients to actually sign on, which is going to increase the size of the total addressable market and increase the clip at which Palantir can sign up new customers. Okay, a final qualitative point that I want to talk about is the fact that Palantir has been investing in special purpose acquisition companies, or SPACs, to actually develop their client base and to gain access to more data. Because this is a really interesting strategy that I think is really long-term focused and could benefit them in the future. Over the past couple of months, Palantir has made announcements for 14 investment deals in SPACs worth over $300 million altogether. So basically, Palantir is going out and investing in early stage startup companies that they think have real potential for the future. And as a part of the deal, those startups are agreeing to use Palantir's software, which is going to again improve the quality of Palantir's AI, gain access to new sectors, new industries, and as these startups emerge and start to grow potentially into massive companies, then Palantir is just again going to reinforce its position. Of course, there's a bear argument to this SPAC strategy as well, but I will touch on that in the next video. Okay, one last thing I want to mention before moving to the numbers is client retention, because this is really a huge pro in favor of the company. And when Palantir signs up new customers, they rarely leave. And that's either because they see the value of the product or the service so much that they just wouldn't actually want to leave, or the costs of leaving are so high that they actually never end up leaving anyways, but the result is the same regardless. Either way, Palantir is well positioned to turn their customer base into a profit-generating machine for years to come. Okay, so now it's time to talk numbers. Now let's go into the Yahoo Finance page for the company and take a look. So in terms of the overall basics, the shares of the company are trading at $28.71 as of the time of this recording, and it has a market cap of $56 billion overall. There's no dividend for this company because they are focused exclusively on growth, and also you'll see that there's negative earnings per share, but that's also a different story as well because that has to do with some accounting that's related to that stock-based compensation that I spoke about earlier. Palantir's revenue for this year is $1.3 billion. Now, granted, when you compare that to a market cap of 56+ billion, it doesn't seem like much, but a lot of the future growth for the company is supposedly priced into the stock right now. And revenue growth is really what's going to drive the future of this company. So let's take a look at the Q2 earnings report from Palantir's website itself, because that was the last quarter that they reported earnings for. Now, revenue grew 49% year over year in Q2 to $376 million in the quarter. What's better though is that the commercial side of the business grew 90% year over year. And like I said, they closed 60+ deals in that time period, which is incredible. And they're going to continue growing for sure as their sales force grows as well. Moving forward, Palantir is projecting a 30% growth in total revenue for 5 years, which is a bold prediction because most companies don't actually project that far out. But other analysts are suggesting that the growth rates could be a little less. Some are suggesting that it could be more, however, going up into the 40s, maybe even higher. We'll see though. I'm always a little bit skeptical of projections and price targets and things of that nature that try to predict the future. Moving from revenue growth to profitability, Palantir is going to have a gross profit of over $900 million this year, but the net profit is going to be in the negative over $1 billion because of the stock-based compensation. The company has still never turned a bottom line net profit yet, but that's not really an issue because they are focused on growth. Also, that massive expense for stock-based compensation is going to be basically a one-time thing because of the IPO that happened in 2020. So moving forward, that won't be an issue. And actually, they are projecting to hit a net profit at some point next year. When it comes to cash flow, Palantir is cash flow positive and it's going to generate $300 million in free cash for 2021. Palantir's balance sheet is also spectacular. They have over $2.3 billion in cash and less than $250 million in debt right now. So there really isn't much to say here. There is a very minimal short interest in this company as well. Big money and smart money is not currently betting against Palantir. The short interest currently is less than 5%, and generally speaking, a short interest of 10% or less indicates a positive overall sentiment about the company. So while institutional investors may not be heavily buying into Palantir right now, they're also not shorting it. And I honestly think a part of the reason is that the company is actually a little bit complicated to understand what it does, and also it's very difficult to pin down its total addressable market, which makes it difficult to make valuations. I'm not going to get into any of this. I don't like making predictions, and I think that coming up with things like a price target is actually an exercise in total futility. The foundation of any proper due diligence, in my opinion, has to be based on the fundamentals of the company. So there you have it. That is the full Palantir bull case and every major argument in favor of the company that I could find. If you've enjoyed the video, please don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I will be posting the second part of this, the bear case, shortly, as soon as I have time to finish up the research and then record and edit the video. So if you want to see that, then definitely stay tuned, and I will see you in the next one.